It's a big weekend in football as always. Africa gets its fill with a second leg CAF Champions League and Confederation Cup games. Chelsea will surely be crowned Premier League champions, but who's going down? And finally, Mayweather Pacquiao on Saturday. They say the art of conversation is to talk about the right thing at the right time, and this is the right place. You're watching The Conversation. Welcome to The Conversation. I'm Ehi Alonge, and in the studio with me is regular guest Carlos Salvador Mo. Carlos, hello.
Hey, Hoggy.
Good to have you with us. And joining us on Skype from Cape Town, South Africa, sports correspondent Mo Allie. Hello, Mo.
Hi, Ehi. Hi, Carlos. Hi, guys.
Okay, so let's start with the CAF Champions League fixtures. And as we take a look at them, Mo, can you tell us what to look out for this weekend?
Well, I think the two big fixtures, the defending champions, Ehi Alonge, they are up against Raja Casablanca, and Raja actually did well to come back from behind twice to secure a 2-2 draw at home in their first leg. So that would suggest that Ehi would start favourites on their home territory, to go through to the next round and hopefully for them defend their title. In fact, there's a huge possibility of three Algerian teams making it through to the last 8, which would be unprecedented in CAF history for 3 teams from one country to reach the group stages, and they certainly are looking good. The interesting game for me is Al Ahly, and they are up against Maghreb Tetouan, and that's going to be a very, very interesting game because Al Ahly, have to overturn a 1-0 deficit, and for Al Ahly fans, it might be a case of deja vu because last year at the same stage of the competition, they lost to Al Ahly Benghazi. And then went on to play in the Confederation Cup. And, what makes it even more difficult for Al Ahly is the fact that they have to play behind closed doors in Egypt. So it's going to be, they don't have that 12th player behind them playing at home. And Tetouan certainly look like they could do the business against Al Ahly. And they've got Mohsin.
Well, I want to jump in there because you say they could do the business, but even the Tetouan coach has come out and he's not quite as confident as you are that they might be able to push through.
Maybe a bit of gamesmanship, and obviously he wants to, give Al Ahly a false sense of complacency. And Mohsin Yajur, got the free kick to give them the winner for Tetouan in the first leg. Certainly is one of the top scorers in the competition. And I think it's just a bit of psychology. Just give Al Ahly a bit of false sense because they haven't done well in their home league as well. They're 11 points behind the leaders Zamalek in third position, and they've all but given up on the league title. The fact that they don't have any fans to come and watch them in this crucial second leg game is certainly a huge factor. And in fact, so huge that the Al Ahly management actually asked the fans to come and watch them train last night just to give them a bit of a feel and atmosphere, because it can't be pleasant playing in front of a silent stadium when you really, look for the team, for the fans to lift you up, particularly when things aren't going so well on the pitch. So I think it's going to be very, very difficult for Al Ahly, even though they do have home ground advantage and even though they are such a pedigreed side. It might be a bridge too far for them, as they found out last season as well when they lost at the same stage to Al Ahly Benghazi of Libya.
Okay, Carlos, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I was just going to mention, obviously, Mo, you've mentioned there the home advantage. Another big game on the weekend will be TP Mazembe against Stade Malien. Obviously, it was 2-2 in Mali. But of course, talking about home advantage, how do you see that going? Because TP are very formidable at home.
TP are almost unbeatable at their home ground in Lubumbashi. And, the fact that they actually led Stade Malien 2-0 until Stade Malien scored twice in the space of 2 minutes midway through the second half tells you that they are a side in form. And, but Stade Malien obviously would have given themselves a chance by taking those 2 goals and taking it into the second leg on level terms. But those 2 away goals that TP Mazembe have scored would be absolutely crucial as well. And, they've got in Philippe Cateron, the former Mali coach, the Frenchman, certainly a very experienced coach as well. And I certainly would expect TP Mazembe to do the business against Stade Malien. Stade Malien actually might be looking for a bit of revenge because TP Mazembe beat them in the semi-final of the 2013 Confederation Cup, but I think it might just be a bit too tough for them this time round again.
Okay, Mo, you talked about the Confederation Cup there. I mean, a fixture there that stands out for me, partly to do with the Rumble in the Jungle and the link to the boxing this weekend, but the Leopards Vita Club match, that's certainly worth looking out for, isn't it?
Certainly is, and interestingly enough, they are playing at the same stadium where that Rumble in the Jungle fight between George Foreman and Muhammad Ali took place 41 years ago. AS Vita certainly have a job to do at home. They go into the game on trailing by a goal to nil against the Royal Leopards, a team comprising, incidentally, of all policemen. So they might put in an arresting performance against AS Vita. But, AS Vita and the Congolese clubs are normally very difficult to beat. But you've got to take your hat off to the team from Swaziland for them to have got this far in the competition and to have beaten AS Vita, who, remember, lost in the final of the Champions League last year. It is a massive achievement for them. And who knows? I mean, they might devise a defensive strategy to defend that to one-goal lead. But it will be certainly one of the biggest surprises in African competition if they do prevail against a club of the quality of AS Vita, who have the Congolese national coach coaching them as well, Florent Ibenge. So it's going to be a tough ask. But who knows? Strangest things have happened in the game of football.
Okay, I mean, Carlos, you've been looking at the Confederation Cup. Anything stick out for you?
Yeah, I mean, I've just looked at some of the other fixtures. Obviously, Orlando Pirates at home this time round to CF Mounana of Gabon. And also, when you look at Hearts of Oak, both Hearts of Oak and Orlando Pirates came, they scored goals away from home. And I just wanted to know what the implication is in terms of the Confederation Cup when you do, we know like within the European football, away goals is very important. How does that fare within the African competition, Mo?
I think it's absolutely crucial to at least win your home games and not concede, because playing away from home is very difficult. It's much more difficult than you can't compare it with Europe, because they don't have the kind of skullduggery that takes place in African countries when you travel to say Central Africa, for example, or West Africa, where your passport maybe gets held back, or you have a band playing in the middle of the night before the next day. So away games are always tough, and if you can get a goal away from home, and particularly Orlando Pirates getting 2 after they were trailing 2-0, certainly is very, very important for them. And they had a good 4-1 win over SuperSport United in midweek, so they certainly are in form. But my big worry for Orlando Pirates is that the South African season, the league season, actually ends next Saturday, and Orlando Pirates players, if they do progress in the Confederation Cup, would have to play through May, June and August as well, and right through until the end of the year. And there certainly wouldn't be any break for them, and you've got to wonder about the motivation of the players. Would they want to play? They started their preseason in July last year. Would they want to continue playing for a full year and into another year as well? And, they certainly are up for winning an African trophy again. They're South Africa's only representatives. But you've just got to wonder, whether the players will be motivated to carry on playing through what is South Africa's off-season.
Okay, Mo, thank you for that quick trip around what's going on in African football this weekend. I know you yourself are off to watch a few games this weekend. Thank you for joining us, and we'll make sure we catch up with you next week.
Thanks very much for having me, Ehi.
And when we come back from the break, we'll be talking EPL. We know what's going on at the top, but there's a lot more going on at the bottom. See you after the break. Welcome back. It's EPL time now, and it's probably a little easier at the top than it is at the bottom. Looking at the fixtures ahead this weekend, we've got Leicester, Newcastle, which we'll be talking a lot about. Sunderland, Southampton, also another interesting fixture. Man United, West Brom, intriguing fixture there on Saturday. And looking to Sunday, we've got the winners elect, maybe being coronated against Crystal Palace, and Spurs and City, 2 teams perhaps not as pleased with their season as everybody else. Carlos, starting with you. At the top, let's accept that it's pretty much Chelsea's title. No offence to Eagles fans there, Crystal Palace fans. Question that I want to ask you, Man United and their season. Started this season, because I'm actually surprised that they're in the Champions League because of the way their season started. What's your take on their season?
Yeah, I mean, I think they were disappointed coming from a pre-season where they'd done very well and played some of the biggest teams in Europe. I think a lot was expected. And the team failed to kind of deliver at the beginning of the season. But I think, when you look at the season, the way it's gone, it was always going to be about the Champions League. And it has a lot of implications. For one, the new kit deal that they've signed with Adidas, there's an implication that, if they're not in the Champions League, some of the finances for that kit deal wouldn't be passed through. So for United, being in fourth position is almost as important at this moment in time than winning the league several years past.
Okay, but let me ask you about that just quickly, because I think there's so much more to talk about at the bottom. But we saw Liverpool have a great season because they weren't in Europe last season. The year before, we saw Tottenham out of Europe early, and they also had quite a good season with Gareth Bale and obviously Modric and going back to those years. So good players. United weren't in Europe at any level this season, so they didn't have the Thursday worry, they didn't have midweek fixtures, they didn't have to deal with any disappointment of losing. They've been able to build steadily. But next year in the Champions League, you're looking at the squad now, they are going to need to buy in quite a number of players, surely, to be able to compete, or do you think they're just going to be still part of a building phase and they'll let players like Smalling and Jones develop?
They will let certain players develop. As we know, Smalling's got a new deal, so they've obviously think he can develop. But in terms of the squad itself, I think they'll try and get rid of a lot of players during this pre-season. And I think they need to bring in players to go and, win the title next year, or try at least to win the title. And in terms of being in a Champions League position now, that's the kudos in terms of trying to bring in the right level of player. Without the Champions League place, I don't think they could have attracted that type of player.
Okay, now at the bottom of the table, a lot of clubs would love to swap places with Man United and have those sort of issues to deal with. But it's fair to say, we're looking at it, the bottom two, QPR and Burnley, they're pretty much gone bar for the singing. But from 18th to 13th, so we're looking at clubs like Sunderland, maybe Hull, maybe even West Brom, Newcastle, Villa. Yeah. Those clubs, one of those is going to go down. What's your take on what's going on at the bottom of the table?
Well, currently, as you say, Sunderland is in 18th position. And, when you look at all the teams above them, so you look at Leicester, they're in a good run. Will they get more points? I believe they will. I think they'll even get some wins there. They got a big game against Newcastle. Is Aston Villa going to get points? I think they will. They're quite confident. Hull has shown us recently by winning those 2 games that they're in for the running. Is Newcastle going to get any points? I can't see that happening.
They've only got 9 from 45. I mean, that's one massive drop in terms of form.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously they've dropped in form. The manager's gone. And I think losing Pardew, or Pardew exiting, should I say, have actually probably shown Newcastle fans what a good job he was doing with the resources he's had. But I think it's really out of Newcastle and Sunderland. The only cushion for Newcastle, of course, is that they're on 35 points and Sunderland's on 30. And when you look at Sunderland's running, it's ridiculous. They've got Southampton this weekend. They've still got Everton, Leicester, who's in the bottom. So, they've got some real hard games to compete with.
I mean, Leicester are an interesting club for 2 reasons. Before we look at the manager's behaviour at the press conference the other day, what I actually wanted to talk about was the amount of confidence. They had 4 matches out of 5 won. They're taking on Newcastle today. For them, a win against Newcastle it's another 6-pointer, which they've just come up against Burnley, isn't it? Newcastle get pulled further towards the mire. Leicester a bit safer.
Yeah, I mean, it's all games at the bottom for Leicester over the last couple of weeks have been big. But this one's even bigger because it allows them to push forward. I think the difference between this game and the games beforehand, Leicester are favourites. Everybody's expecting now Leicester to win against Newcastle.
Do you think the manager, I mean, we know the players might be handling it on the pitch, but do you think Nigel Pearson looks like he's handling it off the pitch? I mean, it was a pretty sordid rant he had at the journalist the other day for asking him seems quite straightforward questions.
Yeah, I think within the press network, Pearson isn't the most favourable. Whether I don't believe it's the pressure getting to him at all. I think it's his personality. He's been like that from the beginning of the season, and I'm sure he'll continue into next season if Leicester are still there.
Okay, now, looking at it, as part of it is the run-in. It's not just the fixtures. So we've looked at Leicester, Newcastle, and that's an example for me of Newcastle are probably in a fortuitous position because Pardew did so much work before he left to get them into a relatively safe position. Now, since he's gone, they've been in free fall. However, Sunderland, the club currently in the bottom 3, top of the bottom 3, have a very difficult run-in. Where do you see the line between, I mean, out of those two, who's more likely to stay up?
I think Newcastle, simply because Sunderland needs a lot of points to drag themselves out. And when you look at the teams they've got to play, where do you see them winning games? They're going to finish the last 2 games off against Arsenal and Chelsea. I don't see points coming out of that one. Like I said, they're going to play Leicester. Leicester at that point may be safe, but they'll want to push on. There really isn't no easy game for Sunderland. I mean, they'll take pride in that their performance against Stoke was probably their best performance of the season. They shouldn't have drew. They just missed they didn't put the goals away. They created numerous chances and they didn't have the quality to put it away. And I think that's eventually what's going to see them.
Sunderland as a club, I mean, they're one of those clubs. They've been in. I mean, dare I say it, with a season in the Championship, getting a bit of a winning culture back into the club, because I assume they'll be competitive in the Championship, allowing them to properly rebuild. They've had a number of managers recently, high-profile managers. Yeah. They've just signed Defoe. I mean, what's the mix at Sunderland?
Yeah, I think when you have a club who's constantly always at the bottom of the table, especially a club like Sunderland, I think it's one thing when you're a club that's come into the Premier League and you're struggling. But with Sunderland, they've been there for several years. But for several years, they've been at the bottom fighting year after year. So, essentially in football, we always blame the manager. But as you've said, they had Martin O'Neill. They got rid of him. Di Canio came in, got rid of him. Gus Poyet came in, got rid of Gus. And now we've got Dick Advocat. And if you look at, that trend, it's almost like the club hasn't quite got a stable plan in place. And therefore, if you keep bringing in new managers, you will have that kind of impetus to, it's something new, let's get it going. But actually, when you look at the squad and the team itself, they haven't had sustainability within the Premier League for some years now.
Okay, so, I've put my cards on the table, and I think of from Sunderland to West Brom and all the teams in between, I think Sunderland are most likely to go down. Leicester have too much momentum. Newcastle have a bit of a buffer. How do you feel about that? Do you think it's Sunderland? And if it's not Sunderland, who?
Well, at this moment in time, I'd have to say it's Sunderland. I can't see it going any other way just because of their running. I think you can't look at other teams to save you by losing or winning a game, and I just think it's too tough.
Okay, when we come back from the break, two big events taking place this weekend. One in the world of athletics, and if you don't know the other one, then where have you been? It's Mayweather Pacquiao. We'll see you after the break. This year's World Relays in Nassau will pit more than 600 competitors in 5 events each for men and women. All eyes will be on 6-time Olympic gold track medalist Usain Bolt as he faces off American rival and reformed drugs cheat Justin Gatlin. But with blessings of Kabore of Nigeria, Asabel Kiprop of Kenya and some other African stars in Nassau, it should be a memorable event. Okay, Carlos, let's start with the athletics because, the boxing is my favourite and I want to save it to the end because there's lots to talk about there. But with athletics, it's been a good event. It's kind of a new event, the relays. How do we read performances and athletes performing in this event?
Well, it's a key event in terms of when you look at the Olympics, the fastest 8 teams within these relays will automatically qualify for Rio. Okay. So it's an important event. And, when we look at, let's say, the 4x100 metre, Jamaica's always going to be the favourite. Last year, there was no Usain Bolt because he was injured, but Johan Blake led the team. Johan Blake's injured this time, but Usain Bolt's back. So for the public, it's always great at an athletics meeting to have Usain Bolt there.
Okay, and also, as I mentioned before, we got African stars like Blessings Okabare. We've also got the Kenyan teams who are running, because the distances aren't the usual distances. We've got 4x200, we've got middle distance relays. So it's a bit of a fun event. Relays always been one of those events that whenever the big meets happen, everyone seems to be excited by the relays. Yeah,
I think as kids, from competing at school, everybody wants to do the relay because it's an opportunity in an individual sport for you to act as a group. So, when you look at any big competition, whether it's the World Championships or the Olympics, the relay is always on that last day. It's always something to look forward to. So to have a meet where it's all about relays, it's just fantastic.
Okay, you talked there about the opportunity to operate as a team in an individual sport, but one sport where you prepare as a team with trainers, with coaches or whatever else, but you definitely perform as an individual is the boxing. And of course, as I said at the top, this weekend we've got Pacquiao who's going to be entering the ring for boxing's fight of the century with Mayweather, and an entire country is going to be in his corner as the Philippines grinds to a halt to dementedly cheer on its favourite son.
Everything that I have accomplished is God who gave me the strength. You know, I just want to be an example and inspiration to everybody how my life before I became a boxer. Yeah. I used to sleep in the street, you know, starving, hungry, and now I cannot imagine that the Lord raised me in this position.
That's what both competitors bring to the table, excitement. The biggest fight in boxing history, and I'm a part of it, so that's a great thing, you know. I'm just truly, truly blessed to be where I'm at. I feel good, I feel strong, and I see you guys Saturday. Thank you.
Okay, Carlos, I mean, there's lots of examples in world sport through the years, even back to Pele, of individuals being able to carry entire countries, entire nations behind them. Tell me a little bit about Manny Pacquiao and Philippines, because for me, it's actually beyond the Philippines. I mean, it seems everybody you meet wants Manny to win, but thinks Mayweather's going to win, and that's probably something to do with character. But, I mean, that sort of relationship has got to be special for an athlete.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, you know, he's the country's favourite son. Obviously, we know that Mayweather isn't in terms of the US. I think when you look at Manny Pacquiao and what he means to the Filipino people, he's a very important individual. I mean, just following from their press, one of the electricity boards actually asked some of the population to down tools so as to make sure that within that particular region there is enough energy for the game or the bout not to be cut out. So that's how important Manny Pacquiao is. I think, you know, he is the underdog. He's fighting against Mayweather. He's 47-0. And I think what happened with Mayweather is because of the entertainment value that he brings on and the bravado, some people tend to think he doesn't take the boxing as serious. But for me, 47-0, that's serious enough.
I mean, what's the danger for Mayweather and his legacy if that O becomes a 1?
Well, once that becomes a 1, there is no legacy. You know,
there's still the 47.
No one's going to remember the 47. They're going to remember the 1 where he couldn't make 48. And you know, for Pacquiao, there's nothing to lose. There's no real pressure in comparison.
Okay. Well, there's speculation about him going for Marciano's record, though he has said he's only got 2 fights left. I'm going to put the two things together and say, is the worst thing to happen if he really, as he's been saying in the press recently, he doesn't really, it's not about the O, and he's not just about boxing, he's a businessman. The best business decision for him actually probably is a loss or a draw, because the rematch will probably double all receipts on this, surely.
I think he is a businessman, and he's shown that with several activities that he does outside of boxing, and the fact that he takes the entertainment value so importantly, and he makes a lot of money from that. But I don't think there's any sportsman who's going to be 47-0 and want to make that 47-1 just to get another, you know, a rematch. I think he would much prefer to have a legacy of being unbeaten than to make some more money on a rematch. He's already got a lot of adventures where he can make money, and he will continue to make money. So I think that's just him kind of taking the pressure off of himself.
Okay, my last question to you really is looking at the persona of both fighters. Obviously, we know they're quite yin and yang. But one thing that's actually impressed me watching the build-up to this fight is that the trash talking has almost been negative. They've realised there's no need to sell the fight. There's no need to speak disrespectful of each other. That's been a breath of fresh air. But underneath it all, who do you think is more nervous? Because Mayweather's not himself at all.
Well, yeah. Well, this is the question. I think Freddie Roach was saying that the fact that he's quiet is evident that he is nervous and that he didn't actually want the fight, and it's a fight that's been forced by his contract with Showtime. I was listening to some ex-boxers, and Holyfield said, there's a lot of talking in boxing, but will the fight deliver?
Okay, will the fight deliver? I really, really can't wait. I'm really looking forward to this. And on Monday, this is all I'm going to be talking about, so look forward to it. But meanwhile, follow us on Twitter and Facebook, post your own opinions and queries, and be part of Africa's sporting conversation.